I'm Steffanie Rivers. Welcome to the conversation, kings and queens. Come on in. You're watching my journal, and we want to welcome you to the conversation. If this is your first time joining, welcome. If you are returning, welcome back to the conversation. I'm Steffanie Rivers. I'm tricasting on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn. So feel free to comment and share this conversation with others as we're about to get started. Now, just as people are talking about Jim Crow 2.0, that's what they're calling the Georgia State Legislature's decision to try to roll back voting rights that have been granted for the past 50 years. Some people in North Carolina are trying to turn back the hands of time to modern day lynch mob. So that's what we're going to talk about this evening. Think about Black Wall Street in Greenwood, Oklahoma in the early 1900s. Think about Rosewood, Florida in 1923. Or you might even think about Emmett Till in 1955 in Mississippi when he was removed from his uncle's house by a lynch mob who accused him of flirting with a white woman and then took him out and killed him, executed him. That is the type of terror that we are talking about that happened not in 1900, not in 1923, not in 1955. We're talking about in 2020, North Carolina. But the Black woman that it happened to is standing her ground against the armed white mob that tried to intimidate her and her son into an illegal search of their home. The ringleader who showed up at this Black family's home was a law enforcement officer who was wearing his cop uniform. He had his service weapon on his hip. And the thing is that it was his day off. He was not on duty, and it was the wrong jurisdiction. This was not even where he was a law enforcement officer. This instance is a clear example of the intimidation, the attempted intimidation and the misuse of legal authority. Now this Black woman and her son have filed a civil lawsuit against the out of bounds cop and the angry white search mob that showed up to her house. So here's why we're talking about this today, because it's important for you to know your rights in your home. It's important for you to know your rights while driving your car. It's important for you to know your rights while you're walking down the sidewalk. Because if you don't know your rights, or if you don't have the courage to assert your rights in the face of authority, there's always somebody who is going to try to infringe upon those rights and take them away from you. So such is the case with Monica Shepherd. Monica Shepherd, she lives in Rocky Point, North Carolina. That's about 30 minutes from Wilmington, North Carolina, where NBA legend Michael Jordan grew up. So again, if you're new to the conversation, be sure to like and share and subscribe. So when I post new videos, you will be the first to know. Now, here's what happened. Monica Shepherd was in bed. It was on a Sunday night, probably getting ready for work the next morning. She lives with her son, her teenage son. His name is Damien. So Damien, at the time, this was in May of 2020, so not even a year ago, Damien was at home. He was getting ready to graduate from high school. It was around 10 p.m. when somebody knocked on their door. That somebody was Jordan Keita. So before I show you Jordan Keita, I'm going to share with you Miss Monica Shepherd and her son Damien. This is a picture of Monica Shepherd and her son Damien. All right. So now they were at home minding their own business, and then this guy shows up on the right. His name is Jordan. Okay, so now I'll show you momentarily because I'm going to get it ready. So let's see. So now I'm about to show you Jordan Keita and his father. All right, on the right side, that is Jordan Keita. He's the out of bounds cop who showed up at the Shepherd home, and with not only with himself in a cop uniform, not only with his service revolver on his hip that the Shepherd family said he kept putting his hands on, which is a clear sign of intimidation. He also had with him his neighbor who is not in law enforcement, just some dude named Austin Wood, who had an AR-15 around his neck, standing behind Keita, the guy in the purple. Okay, so let's go back. And now these Jordan Keita, Austin Wood, who I can't find a picture of, and we're going to talk more about that, because if it was a black man who was going around to the terror of the neighborhood with an AR-15, we would see his picture already. We would know who he is. So you had Jordan Keita, you had his neighbor, Austin Wood, and you had, according to the Shepherd's neighbors, you had about a dozen white armed people who were standing in the streets as backup to Keita and backup to Woods. Okay, so that's what the Penders were dealing with. So Miss Shepherd is upstairs asleep. Her son answers the door. Jordan Keita is at the door, and Keita, a deputy sheriff and a jailer in New Hanover County, that's where he worked. Keita wore his deputy uniform, had his service weapon on his hip, and approached the door and knocked on it. But here's the thing. The Shepherd family, they don't live in New Hanover County. They live in Pender County. Rocky Point, North Carolina is in Pender County. And so Keita was a bully cop pretending to have authority that he didn't have on that day, because he wasn't even on duty, because this wasn't even where he worked. And his neighbor, like I said, Austin Wood, was there too, and they had the Dirty Dozen backup. Okay, so it was reminiscent of a scene from the 1920s when an angry white mob show up at the home of a black person looking for an alleged criminal, and they are now going to be judge, jury, and executioner of this said black person. So that's what was going on. Now, here's what happened. Apparently, Keita's, a relative of Keita who lived with him in their family home, had gone missing. And she's a biracial girl. She was about 15 years old at the time. So apparently, they had been looking for her all over the area. And through the grapevine, the family heard that the missing girl was last seen with a black teenager. And they named the black teenager. So they had the black teenager's name. They had the black teenager's last known address. Okay. So then The family then takes the information and goes to Pender County because, again, they all lived in New Hanover County. Goes to Pender County and says, hey, Pender County law enforcement, we're looking for our missing girl, our missing family member, and we're going to go door to door. So the people in Pender County knew that there was a missing girl. So they show up, Keita being the ringleader with his armed AR-15 armed neighbor with the armed Dirty Dozen mob behind them, show up at the shepherd's home, knock on the door. Damien answers. So Keita says to him, I'm looking for, and names the black teenager. Let's just call the black teenager Corey. So he was like, I'm looking for Corey because I'm looking for my missing family member who was last seen with Corey. Damien, Miss Shepherd's son, goes on to explain to Keita, who's at the door in his intimidating police uniform with his intimidating police service weapon on his hip, and says, I'm not the person you're looking for. I have no idea who this girl is that you're looking for. And that person that you're looking for does not live here. So at this point, all the noise and commotion, Miss Shepherd, Mama Shepherd, hears from her bedroom where she's trying to get some sleep because it's 10 o'clock at night. And so she comes to the door and she confirms what her son has said. What's going on? So Keita is asserting himself with her as well. It later comes out in the report. So she says, look, my son is not who you're looking for. You're at the wrong address. And we don't know this girl. And as a way to show that this is not, you're at the wrong place, the son, because he was just about to graduate, his high school, they pass out those yard signs that say, congratulations, fill in the blank of the senior, you're about to graduate. So let's show you the sign that the son pointed out. So the son pointed out to all right, you're seeing the sign. Now, so again, angry white mob at the door. And Damien says, look, I'm not Corey. I'm not the guy you're looking for. Look, I am Damien. I'm about to graduate from high school. You got the wrong house. Don't know the girl. The guy who you are looking for does not live here. Okay, so now back to the story. So at that point, according to Miss Shepherd and her son Damien, Keita, the bully cop with the gun on his hip, intimidating them, puts his foot in the door and will not let them close the door. So at some point, somebody with some sense, which I don't know where they were and why they didn't stop this from happening to begin with, somebody realizes not only is this not the guy we're looking for, we're at the wrong house. Now, why is it? See, white people always want to say, why do you bring race into the situation, Black people? That's because when we look at your actions, if you would just use common sense, if you would just do your research first and not show up at Black people's houses acting like you got privilege and that you can do everything and we don't have any rights, then we wouldn't have to bring race into it. But clearly it's an issue of race, because had they done their investigating, they would have realized, one, they were at the wrong house, and this could have been avoided to begin with, because this neighborhood, it was a white neighborhood. The only Black family that lived there were the Shepherds. Okay, so but just because they were the only Black family that lived there doesn't mean that Damien was the person who was the alleged guilty person. And so here's where I want to stop and say, let's address the madness right now. First of all, this kid, Jordan Keita, he was out of his jurisdiction. Okay, he was trying to intimidate them by wearing his cop uniform and with his service weapon on his hip. But later on, he said, oh, well, my family member was missing and I forgot that I had on my cop uniform. Really? You forgot that you had on your police officer uniform when you approached somebody's house, acting like you were the cops. Okay, that's one thing. Number two, he tried to question somebody who and wasn't even sure of who it was that he was talking to, when the guy clearly told you and clearly showed you evidence that he was not the person you were looking for. So one, you should have turned around right then. And then you tried to force your way into their home to search the place. So people, it doesn't matter who you are, but mostly Black people in America know this. If the cops show up trying to get you to answer questions about something, you don't have to answer questions. What you do need to do is call your attorney. You tell them, I refuse to answer your questions without my attorney present. And at that point, they have to stop asking you questions. At that point, you sit there silently if you're at the police department. At that point, you have a right to close your door. You have a right to leave the scene. If you are not under arrest, then you still don't have to say anything, especially if you're under arrest. You really don't want to talk without an attorney. That's the number two thing. The number three thing is law enforcement has no business trying to enter your premises to search for anything or to enter your premises without a search warrant when there's nothing going on. There was nothing going on that would lead them to, they have to have a search warrant, basically. These people did not have a search warrant. And so I commend Miss Shepherd for knowing her rights. But then the dude, because she knew her rights, he gets mad and puts his foot in the door and keeps them from closing the door. The only way that they were able to find out or to retreat, the only reason why Keita and AR-15 dude and the Dirty Dozen white angry mob retreated is because somebody had the sense to realize, y'all, we had the wrong address. So then they left. So let me address this. Okay, a young girl was missing. And I understand that the family wants to find her. But there's a way you look for, especially if you're going door to door, there's a way you do things. And they clearly did it wrong. Now, if the girl was missing and the girl's mama or somebody or her mama or her daddy, I'm sure had to come to the door and said, Miss Shepherd, we're looking for our daughter. And we were told she was last seen with Corey, who is not Damien, by the way. And we are just do you know any information? Can you please help us? Because I'm sure a mother of a child would not want their child to be missing. And they would understand if a child is missing, they're going to do all that they can to help come to a resolution with that. So, but that wasn't how it was done. That wasn't how it was done. And I'm not saying you should let somebody in your house just because the mama show up either. Because what's going to happen is whatever you do or whatever they find in a search that they did not have a search warrant, if you just let people in, if you just start talking to people, trust and believe, especially this, Black people know this. If you're the only Black person who works in a job in your department, if you're the only Black student in your class, if you are the only Black family in your neighborhood, at some point when something goes wrong, they're going to come knocking on your door because they think you are a part of the wrongdoing. They think you did it or you know somebody who did it. That's just how most racist white people are. That's how they act. So you don't need to say anything. Don't answer no questions. Don't tell them, don't let them in so they can start looking. You tell them, you know what? Let me call my son. This is probably what would have happened, at least if it was my house. Let me call my son. Do you know anybody? First of all, the person you're looking for, he's not my son, but let me ask my son, do you know anything about this? And when he says no, all right, if we find out anything, we certainly will let you know. We hope y'all find him. And good luck with that and close the door. Because you are not going to infringe on my rights just because somebody is missing or somebody got shot or whatever. And what most police officers or most people in this situation would do when they come to you, the black person, the only black person in the area, in the neighborhood, at school, at work, is they say something like, well, why do you not want to talk? If you don't have nothing to do with it, you should want to tell us everything. Police will say, well, if you don't have any, if you're not guilty of anything, why do you need an attorney? They'll say things like that. Well, you need an attorney because of all the black people that have been railroaded, that are in prison now over just trying to cooperate. And now they find themselves behind bars for dozens of years, for a generation, based off of one little sentence that they said, when if they just would have been quiet, then that might have made all the difference had they had an attorney present. That's why you don't say nothing. That's why you don't give them any type of information, no DNA information. You don't make a statement. You don't do anything without your attorney. So back to the story. So then once the angry white mob leaves with this out of bounds cop and his AR-15 toting friend, after they leave, then that's when Miss Shepherd is able to call the real cops from Pender County to say some angry white people just showed up trying to terrorize us and trying to get us to approve an illegal search of my home, looking for the girl that's missing. Okay, so they think their white privilege allows them to do this without impunity. And so that's when the real Pender County sheriff showed up to the house and interviewed Miss Shepherd, but did not file any charges against anyone. Now, the people had left by then. They had left by that time. Keita and his like angry mob, a dozen dirty gang, they had already left already. But at this point, you're feeling traumatized. You're feeling like what the hell? You know, like what is about to happen? What if she wasn't home? What would have happened to her son then? Would they have burst in and took him out and did God knows whatever that we have proof of 400 years of what they do, angry white people, when they think they know something and they got it all wrong? The facts don't matter. But until they come to reality, but by that time, somebody is dead already or maimed already. So that's what happened. Now, the next day, Miss Shepherd says when she followed up with the sheriff, or when the sheriff followed up with her and they talked on the phone, the sheriff tried to talk her out of filing charges against the angry mob. And then she was feeling guilty about, like, what in the world? Like, these people showed up to my house with guns and tried to force their way in, or at least it kept me from closing my door because he had his foot in the door. I'm sure he never said, you know what, I'm not a local law enforcement, but you know, it's like he used his police, his law enforcement uniform and his gun to intimidate her, try to intimidate her, because what do you do at that point? You got somebody in your home or trying to come into your home, trying to do an illegal search with a cop uniform on, a gun, and a foot in the door. Now, if he didn't have the uniform on, I'm sure she would have slammed the door in his face, broke his foot, all of that. But you don't know how these people gonna act. He got a gun on his hip. His friend got an AR-15. Now, let's go back to that. I said that Keita said he forgot that he had his uniform on. Well, what about the guy, Austin Wood, his friend who was standing behind him, who had the AR-15 around his neck? Well, when they questioned him about that, this guy, Austin Wood, said, you know what? He said he doesn't know why he brought the AR-15. He was just standing there in the background. He didn't approach the door with Keita. He was just there in the yard. Well, why did you have the AR-15 to begin with, Austin Wood? They asked him later on in the investigation follow-up. He said he had it because he used the flashlight at the end of the gun that he had used to search the woods before they arrived at the house. Okay, so you use the AR-15 flashlight in the woods to search for somebody. So, but you're standing at the door of a family, a Black family, at 10 o'clock at night with an AR-15 on. Why did you have it at that point? You're not in the woods. He said, oh, he don't know why. He can't even come up with a good enough reason why he did it, because they were there to intimidate and terrorize. That's why he did it, but he can't say that. So again, the neighbors are the one who says the Dirty Dozen 15 that was backing up Keita and Austin Woods, they were in Miss Shepherd's yard, in the backyard, with flashlights. They could see flashlights. So they're trespassing. They're trespassing at this point. And then when they all leave, the sheriff comes. Miss Shepherd starts telling the sheriff about what happened. And he's so busy trying to talk her out of filing charges. So here's what happens when that happens. If you ever have anything that goes down and you want to file charges, what you normally do is you call the police. You might call the police on the scene. The police see what happened, and then they can file charges because they are witnesses to the action. One. Or if it happens after the fact that you call the police, let's say you get into an argument or a fight or whatever, and you then call the police after the fact, or you go down to the police station or the sheriff's department or whatever it might be, and you want to file charges, then you do a police report, and then the subsequent action is the police, depending on what it is that you allege happened, they will file charges. But in the case of this, where the Miss Shepherd tried to get the sheriff to file charges, and he pretty much is trying to talk her out of it, now what do? Well, the third thing that you can do is you can go to the district attorney's office, because the district attorney's office is the one that's going to file the charges. So Miss Shepherd said, okay, sheriff, you don't want to file charges, I'm gonna get me an attorney. So she gets her attorney, and her attorney files the charges against Keita and Wood. Now, even though the DA admitted that he didn't even want to file charges, see, that's what happens. They all in this together. That's why the criminal justice system is such a mess now, because if it was a Black person walking around the neighborhood with an AR-15 and knocking on people's doors and talking about, let me in, I want to search for my missing child, how long do you think it would have taken for them to file charges? Immediately. But when it's white people that do the same thing, they come up with all these different reasons why they don't want to file charges. And that's what's going on. It's hard to get justice in America, especially when the cop, Keita, who was out of bounds, not even in his jurisdiction, and his friend Wood, they admitted that they broke the law. So what's the problem with you filing charges? Now, the Dirty Dozen 12, the gang of 12 people, nobody claims to know. Nobody seems to know who they are. Nobody can find out their names. So unfortunately, those Dirty Dozen gang of 12, nobody knows their names. Therefore, they couldn't actually file charges against them. But the DA, after he, did his talking to other DAs around the area, it was all came out in the different reports. Even the DA was trying to come up with a reason why he couldn't file charges. But at the end of the day, it's like, look, if we don't file charges, we're going to be answering to a whole lot more than this. Because put this in context, this happened in early May of 2020. That was a month or so after Ahmaud Arbery had been shot down in the street by the McMichaels like an animal, over them claiming that he had stole something or trying to steal something. This happened a few weeks after Breonna Taylor was shot down by police from the Louisville Police Department, who lied to get a no-knock search warrant to arrest not her, but somebody else who had been arrested earlier that night. So we know the story. And now she's dead. So we don't know if the Shepherds knew all this, but what we do know is they felt terrorized. We do know is when white people feel like they can do anything without impunity, they will. So we don't know what they were feeling, but overall, they should have, at the least they should have done, law enforcement in Pender County, North Carolina, Rocky Point area, they should have been willing to file charges, especially when Miss Shepherd called the sheriff, and the sheriff said he knew that this Austin Wood dude had an AR-15 because he saw him with it earlier when they was in the woods searching. So I don't know the laws about AR-15s in North Carolina, but in some areas, even an AR-15 is an illegal weapon. So there's that. So finally, they filed charges against the two, Jordan Keita and Austin Wood. Now, I showed you Jordan Keita's photo, and I have been trying to find Austin Wood's photo, but I can't find that photo. But here's the thing, like I said, if it was turned around and it was some Black people walking the streets with guns in a white neighborhood looking for a missing girl, it wouldn't have taken them any time, no time at all, to file charges against them. Especially, and here's what probably would have happened if had you knocked on the door of a white family talking about, I'm looking for my missing family member. Just depending on how that white family took it. If they felt like they feared for their lives and started shooting or shot the guy when he put his foot in the door and would let you close it, I'm sure the sheriff would have justified that as a justifiable killing of Black people. But when white people do it to Black people, now you even got a problem filing charges. So here's what happened. The guy they were actually looking for, the Black teenager, he had lived next door to the Shepherds, because it used to be two Black families in the all-white neighborhood. But that Black family had moved out a couple of weeks earlier, so they got the addresses mixed up. They were supposed to be next door. Now, whether or not Damien knew that the guy lived next door or not, it's not up to him to tell y'all none of that. All he said was, you got the wrong person. I don't know the girl. You got the wrong house. Now, since y'all supposed to be so together and so organized, y'all need to get y'all's facts straight before you start knocking on people's doors, racist white people. That's what y'all need to do. It's not our responsibility to lead you in the right direction, because we don't know if this dude is guilty or not guilty of what you claim he guilty or not guilty of. We don't know that. All I can tell you is get the hell from my door. because I ain't got nothing to do with it. So fast forward, then George Floyd gets killed. And as a matter of fact, modern day lynching, and they're about to start. I think it might start this week. The murder trial of the police officer who killed him in the street is going to start next week. So be looking out for that. So fast forward just a few weeks ago, February 2021, a judge dismissed the charges, found them not guilty, rather. A judge found Jordan Keita and Wood, last name Wood, Austin Wood, found them not guilty of the charges after a trial. Now, how they gonna be not guilty when they said they was guilty? They didn't say we didn't do it. Why was there even a trial? A trial is when somebody says, I'm not guilty. But they said they did it. So they were charged with trespassing. They were charged with going to the terror of the community. That's what Keita was charged with, in addition to trespassing and terror to the in addition to trespassing. Jordan Keita, the out of bounds cop, was charged with not doing right. I don't know the exact wordage terms, but he was enforcing his law. He was putting his law enforcement without being in the right jurisdiction. He was asserting himself as law enforcement in that situation when he clearly was in the wrong area. That's what the charges were. And he was fired by the new Hanover County. He was fired by the new Hanover County Sheriff's Department for that very reason. Now, the other guy, Austin Woods, he was charged with going to the terror of the community and trespassing. And again, the other 12, Dirty Dozen 12, they didn't have their names. So at some point, they had a trial and they found them not guilty. So they never really said why they found them not guilty, but here's the thing. If you say, yeah, I did it, I just don't understand. I didn't mean to make them feel terrorized. That still does not erase the fact that you committed the crime. That's like saying I broke in and I stole some stuff, but I didn't know you was home. Come on now. It doesn't matter whether or not you realize I was home. You are wrong. So this is another example of how the criminal justice system will give a Black person the most penalty for doing a least amount of a crime. But when it comes to white people doing a crime, oh, they're not guilty. Oh, they didn't mean it. Oh, he was just having a bad day. Come on now. We see you, racist white people. We see you. So, okay, they've been found not guilty of the charges, but that doesn't mean that's the end of it, because Ms. Shields has now filed a civil lawsuit against Jordan Keita and Austin Woods because of they essentially violated the civil rights of her and her son for having they infringed upon their rights to fair housing, according to the lawsuit. Fair housing in that it is their right to live in harmony, to not be encroached upon, to not have a member of law enforcement to come and try to intimidate them and do an illegal search of their home and try to force them to an interview against their rights. They put a whole bunch of stuff in the civil lawsuit, and the attorney they got spelled it out talking about the history of the KKK and how they intimidate Black people and Black families and how they entered their homes against their will. And they laid it out. And they also mentioned how when they went to the police department or the sheriff's department in that area, the sheriff's department refused to press charges when charges should have been filed, as seen by the DA, who eventually press charges against him. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I'm certainly going to keep up with it. And I want to commend Miss Shepherd for being courageous enough to assert herself in the face of authority or supposed authority that tried to infringe on her rights and the rights of her son. And since that time, Miss Shepherd has gone and gotten her license to carry a weapon, and she carries. Hopefully, I don't know her, but it's no need in carrying license if you don't carry a weapon. That. So, if you find yourself being infringed upon, or you find yourself driving down the street and somebody and a police officer pulls you over, it's within your right to ask him, is this your jurisdiction? May I get your badge number? Go on and write all that stuff down. Go on and write it down and have it to the side and let them know I'm not the typical person you just gonna pull over and start demanding stuff of me, especially if they ask you, you mind if I do a search? You ask them, do you have a search warrant? If they don't have a search warrant, no, you cannot do a search. If they show up to your house asking crazy questions, talking about, I'm here to talk to your son or talk to you about, I don't know nothing about it, you got the wrong person, and no, you can't come in without a search warrant. And if they talk about going to get one, while you getting a search warrant, I'm gonna be getting my attorney, because I'm still not going to answer no questions. We need to be on our game. You don't have to be an attorney. You just need to get you an attorney. So that's what's going on. 2.0 lynch mob in the house. 2.0 Jim Crow in the house. People are trying to take this country back to, or they're not, and I was about to say take it back 50 years, but really, I don't think we've ever progressed as much as we think, because certain events and certain people in the spotlight will allow racist white people to think that they now can have free reign to do what they've been itching to do for the past 50 years, and that's infringe upon the rights of everybody. But not today, racist white people, not today. So to find out more about the things that I care about, go to the written version of my journal. It's at eurweb.com. And I'm typing that in. eurweb.com. Now, if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe so that the next time that I post videos, mostly on Sunday evenings, you will be the first to know. And that's the conversation for today. Thanks, and have a super day.